malaria, yellow fever, and a range of other, well, delightful, lovely things. They are, of course, mozzies.
Well, let's find out how to prevent and protect ourselves, especially at this time of the year, from Dr. Gordon Bland. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Pleasure.
Right, mosquitoes, not something that we take too much precaution for, especially in this part of the region. But what we don't realize is that apart from being carriers of a lot of deadly diseases, it can also lead to a lot of unpleasant skin reactions. So if you can please start off by highlighting some of the risks involved with mosquito and insect bites.
Sure. Look, you've hit on a couple of them there already. They are definitely what we call a vector for illness, as in they're a method of transmitting illness to us as human beings. And the big common infections that we know about there are things like malaria and yellow fever. So they're the more serious aspects from mosquitoes. Other things, though, they can be an irritant on the skin. So we can have simple skin reactions. Some people will even suffer quite severe allergy responses to mosquito bites.
You've got me going already. No, this is one from last night. This is one I did earlier. To itch or not to itch, though, once you've been bitten?
Really good question. Look, sometimes it's hard not to itch. The temptation is sometimes just too much. We're recommending people try not to scratch them. In fact, I was doing some reading just recently, and there was a suggestion that rather than scratching, perhaps slapping them is a better option. They want to encourage children to slap rather than scratch. The theory there is when you scratch a bite, you further inflame and irritate the lesion itself. So you actually amplify your body's overreaction to the bite, and it ends up being more itchy.
So we just let it heal by itself, and we don't use any kind of creams or ointments to avoid it?
I'll let you two play with that later. Look, there's a couple of things you can do that are quite useful. Ice often helps quite a lot, so even if it's crushed ice or an ice cube directly onto the spot itself. There are lots of different topical preparations you can buy in the pharmacy that are either a combination of anaesthetic, so some xylocaine gel, or even some mild anti-inflammatories. So they can help take away the discomfort.
What about, I mean, you hear so many of those sort of urban myths, a little bit of folklore. Wherever you go in the world, someone's got the answer to mosquitoes.
Definitely.
Be it scented candles, be it what you're putting into your bloodstream, garlic as well crops up a number of times. Any research to back up any of these?
There has been lots of research looking at them. One of the big common ones that comes up often is vitamin B1. And being an Aussie, I have to shamelessly promote Vegemite. We often throw Vegemite out as a solution.
Just paint it on yourself.
Definitely, but there's been lots of interesting suggestions. Vicks Vapor Rub, all sorts of strange things. Unfortunately, there isn't often a lot of evidence behind those sort of things.
Interesting, though, and one piece of advice I was given, and a lot of people will be travelling away on holiday now, going to new destinations, etc. Always ask in advance as well if you've got any questions. But one thing I was always saying is once you get there, ask the locals, because the locals usually have some sort of way of preventing mosquitoes.
Definitely.
Bettering it.
Again, being an Aussie, we used to laugh at the Brits who used to come across on holiday in Australia, and they'd get eaten alive by the mosquitoes because they'd brought their own stuff with them. The stuff we produced in Australia was often a stronger concentration, and so the Brits were exposed. We sat back and let them take the fall.
Just didn't tell them, did you?
No.
Just kept quiet.
No, why mention that?
Now, of course, that's what happens if we are affected by a mosquito bite. What are some of the simple, practical prevention techniques that we can apply in our household to protect ourselves?
Sure. Look, mosquitoes love bodies of still water. So we don't see a lot of that in Dubai, particularly in summer with the heat, but it can be quite problematic on things like building sites where there might be pools of water that don't move. Fountains and things like that, moving water isn't an issue because the water is important because the mosquitoes lay their larvae and their eggs on the surface of the water and they then develop and hatch. Moving water they don't like, so fountains and things like that, or rivers or streams or things like that aren't bothered by it. They don't like that sort of stuff, but bodies of still water, so buckets we might have left half full in the garden, a bit of an area in the garden where the water pools when we water the plants, those sort of areas are what we're concerned about.
What about mine as children? Because obviously they're very much at risk. They're not the ones, swatting them out of the air or swat them on skin, etc. How do you protect your little ones from mozzies?
Yeah. Over the age of 2 months, very safe to use the topical mosquito repellents. Under the age of 2 months, we tend to recommend trying to avoid mosquito exposure. And so things like netting, if you're taking them into high mosquito areas, so putting drapes over the prams, things like that to try and keep them covered up. so to minimise the actual exposed skin. Those sort of tricks can be helpful.
One further question as well, because I mean we opened up this little chat, and a lot of people think mosquitoes, malaria, yellow fever, etc.
For sure.
I mean, how sort of conscious do we need to be of malaria, etc.? And every time we get a mosquito bite, should we be running to the clinic and asking for advice?
Look, if we ran in every time we got a mosquito bite, I'd be very busy.
I'll be on my way now.
That's right. The risks are actually quite low, but and the risks with things like malaria, there isn't any endemic malaria in Dubai and in the UAE. We do have cases of malaria though, because a lot of people travel to malaria-prone areas and come back. And one of the interesting things that the authorities here are looking at is trying to make sure that we don't have a high mosquito population that can actually allow those cases that are coming back to start spreading to other humans in the area. So that's one thing there. Where were we going there with that one?
No, it's good advice. It's great advice as well. And obviously, if you want more advice, then get in touch with Gordon. And then get yourself onto our Facebook page, facebook.com/Studio One Live. Links are on there at the moment as well. But good advice to leave us with there in terms of malaria not being a clear and present danger here in the region.
Not in Dubai.
Just go carefully.
Travel.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Gordon.
Pleasure.
Right, time to buzz over to the kitchen now and see how our very own Samir is doing. Come on, Samir.